Cristo.
We're over here at Leo's desk, and just, you want to say hi, Leo?
Hi, everybody.
So tell us about the pink ball. Is that something that you decided to put in, that pink spiky ball, or was this?
Well, yeah, I just decided to come create pink yo-yo.
One cool thing about this character also is that he's actually kind of like a throwback character. We're bringing him back from God of War 1. He actually wasn't in God of War 2, because we definitely want to keep reminding the player that this is a trilogy. They're not supposed to be seen as separate games. So what about animating Kratos? Like, what are some of the things that are kind of challenging?
He has a specific poses that describing him. He has a kind of like a language of poses. You have to use those poses to invent some new animation. So
we're fortunate to have Leo here because he's joining us for God of War 3. He actually is a new member, one of the newest members of the team. So he's doing a great job.
One of the factors of animation is that you're kind of trying to make it invisible. The more successful we are, the less you really notice the animation.
The stuff we've got going on with that boss fight's going to look really impressive. It's another kind of key development for this game, I think.
We're working a lot with the designers, like way more closely, and creating new things with them.
There's a certain type of feeling that in animation we have to achieve, and the most important part, of course, is Kratos and how he moves. Kratos is very direct. We don't try to make him too fancy. If you notice, a lot of times when he's having conversations, he's just kind of standing there waiting for the moment where he needs to say something.
Everything that Kratos does happens for a reason. I don't know if many people even notice these things, but Kratos never moves backwards. He's an aggressive character. He moves with a purpose at all times.
We actually have wooden swords laying around all the time. We definitely get up and try to act it out. It's definitely always hazardous to walk around the animation area. You gotta watch out.
What are the challenges of animating something that big?
Planning out where everything needs to be, like nothing happens on accident. You need to know where everything is. I did not know that it was gonna be this big. I just had an idea and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go with it, which is kind of a bad idea. I learned my lesson. At the same time, I'm glad that it's the size that it is. And the players will be happy that it's in there. I think they'll get an adrenaline rush just from seeing the sequence.
Kratos, your death will not be a gentle one. My eyes!
Camera design is the layout of cameras for the player's point of view in the game. So, and what we do is we basically control that player's point of view throughout the experience.
Cameras start with the design sheet being delivered to us by the level designer. That's the most basic form. We put in all the cameras for the design sheet. Once the cameras are in and it's been play tested and it proves this is a good concept and we go forward with it, it gets sent off to the art department.
That's where they'll take it and they'll spend months sometimes making these areas look really epic, and then they'll get finished with it and then they'll hand it back to us. And a lot of times it's a little bit different, so we'll have to adjust some cameras.
Once the art comes back in and someone's spent a year building that level, they can be very touchy if they spent a year styling in this formation and my camera just goes right past it. We try to do our best to show off everyone's hard work.
And a lot of times there's a lot of cool things that you want to see in there that you can't see, so we'll go back and try to include those pieces in the shot that you get when you're playing the game. And from there, we play test it. This time externally, we get some people from the outside come in, take a look at what we're doing, making sure that that's great. After we get their feedback, implement their feedback, we're ready to go to the next area.
Anything we can do to make the cameras feel cinematic.
And they serve as a guide for the player too, to lead them in the direction that they need to go as well.
Yeah, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
It's sort of like people who play the God of War franchise, after a while they get a feel that if the camera's looking this way, that's important.
In the very end, it always comes back down to what would the player want to see.
Most games in the action genre The player gets most of the control over the camera. The player has no control over the camera in the God of War series.
Fans have been clamoring, and I hear you. We need to look around. We want to look around.
It should be understood that there's really no way we could make the levels look this good if the player could look anywhere they wanted.
What we're trying to do, though, at this time around, is give you key points where you're in the adventure and you can control the camera. So maybe you're in a crazy puzzle room and you need to be able to kind of look around. So in some of these areas, we can give the player control, but in a limited fashion. I hope the fans will appreciate that we're trying to implement their feedback.
What new feature do you like the best from the camera system?
The rail-driven cameras. I think that's been my favorite new feature as far as the technology that we have with the camera.
What's a rail-driven camera for someone who wouldn't know?
A camera that's animated along a course that we have even more control over what the camera is showing.
The rail is essentially what we kind of live and die by. Let's say this is your camera rail, this line here, and let's say this is the thing that's driving the camera. And imagine this is a section of a hallway or something like that Kratos is moving along. We can take this camera here and we can key it. So we key to two different positions. So Kratos is here, the camera is here. When he starts to move along, as Kratos moves along, it will drive the animation of the camera to animate to that position. So as you're cruising along, you'll kind of see it, this kind of view where it's low and looking up at him, and then as he moves along, it will kind of track him and follow him. That's like one of our cool new things that we have that we think we can add a lot of kind of cinematic views to the game.
This is a perfect example of combat cameras right here. Here we're in a room, there's nobody to fight yet. And you can see we're taking a lower angle here. And as we come here, we'll trigger the spawning of a bunch of guys, and you can see the camera is going to lift up so we can show more of the action. And the framing, we're going to fit Kratos more towards the middle so you can see what's happening in front of him and see what's happening behind him. Try to give you the best view as possible for all the different combat actions that you're going to be taking.
So this is an untextured view of the Olympus base. This is what the artist put together first before he assigned any lighting or textures to it. Well, you can see these green boxes. These are the camera zones. They determine when Kratos is within one of those boxes, and once he is, the specific camera tied to that box gets activated. This is what a level would look like after we've added our cameras. You've got it panning around, following Kratos. If you were to take that off, it would basically look something like this. Very basic, not much excitement. You can't really tell where the player is supposed to be going. Adding the cameras is part of what definitely helps the level design flow. Here's a good example of some lead space. We're trying to tell the player this is where you want to go. Jump to this block over here. Once he's done the proper move, we zoom in, get him prepped for this nice shot of him making the leap, and then we transfer to another camera that shows him where you want to jump next, which is from here all the way down to there. So, and then he makes that jump. This would be an example of one of the vista shots we try to do in the game, which is you've got some really amazing piece of scenery in the background that the artists spent a lot of time building. So we want to get that into frame.
Character modeling is taking the art from visual development and turning it into a 3D model, painting it, giving it life, and then handing it off to our character riggers who send it off to animation. So we actually create the object itself.
It's in general just become, I guess you'd say, more sophisticated, but it's more of a traditional media now. It's kind of, if you know how to sculpt traditionally, then you're going to transfer right in. Traditional skills are playing a more important role, which is great.
Do you feel that you've channeling the great masters of art history to help you achieve
I believe
a new
Michelangelo,
level?
Raphael, you know, they speak to me.
Really? One of the big things that I was looking forward to doing is nasty stuff like this, because before this I'd been doing more technical stuff, more like realistic humans. Doing realism is fun to a certain extent. It's more fun to do something that's slightly realistic. There's more artistic license as far as where you can go with it. With realism, there is no artistic license.
Creature design is kind of the most exciting thing. Like Peter was saying, artistic freedom, and just you can do kind of whatever you want and you push things. I mean, that's what the great masters did, so it's just exciting to work on that kind of thing.
workstation. I have my Cintiq, which is what we use to paint and model. This is the monitor that we can actually draw on, paint on the screen, sculpt in ZBrush, which is very helpful and amazing. And then on the left of me, I have my standard monitor where I usually keep my reference. We're able to give metal a kind of specularity that we couldn't before. Scratches, blood, a real shine and realism that we couldn't deliver on the last project. We are working with a lot more polygons and a lot more textures on our project this time, per object.
Here's Hermes, the concept art that I got from Andy Park, who did a great job. You can see the boots are in there and what color they're supposed to be, what material. We're still working on the cloth, making sure that's all rigged nicely. And right now, I'm fighting with the hair, trying to make the hair look good. So hopefully by the time you see this in the game, it'll be looking nice and transparent. So here we are starting him out in ZBrush and adding a lot of the little detail. Say if you wanted his skin to bulge around these straps, it would be really easy to go ahead and just add musculature in here.
Today you may defeat me, but in the end, Kratos, you'll betray only yourself.
This is the centaur in our game. Andy Park did the concept. They always do like a colored version first like this to kind of nail the feel of the character and like what he's all about. And then they'll give us these turnarounds like this one. We have, you know, the horses have these like chest muscles that kind of flow up into the horse neck, you know, this way. And we have abdomen muscles and these obliques that kind of flow in. And where our hips sit, you know, is kind of where their shoulder blades sit. So typically most people draw centaurs. You know, this isn't, I'm not the first one to make one of these things. So, you know, this has been thought about before. But typically, you know, our hips, like where the hips would sit on a human, they put where the shoulder blades would be. It feels kind of like it would work, you know.
Kratos was created from scratch simply because we weren't sure where we wanted to go in the third game, if we were going to change him at all, or if we were going to maintain the PS2 silhouette and essentially the same exact character. We felt like it might be an opportunity to really make some changes to him, considering the level of fidelity and sophistication and what we could create now on the PS3. We started out way out there. 2.5 years later, we decided that he looks like the PS2 model. So we're back to where we started, but it's really coming together and it's right for the game. Kratos is a very heroic, very stylized silhouette, a very thin waist, very broad shoulders. He has kind of a swimmer's build on steroids. He's 8.5 feet tall and he has a head the size of a 4 foot tall person. His waist is probably thinner than all of our wives. He's a trippy looking guy, but he reads really well in the game. Basically what I'm working on now is we've got an upper body and a mesh that the art director as well as the director really like. So now it's a matter of creating a blend map, which is new technology for Sony Santa Monica, in that we can do expressions. Basically, I'm just creating the rage, sculpting him looking angry, and we'll be able to blend this new facial expression into the current model. So we can go from here to here. The satisfaction comes in seeing him in the game saying, wow, that's him. Only look, you can see his veins and you can see him breathing. It looks better than the cinematics. That's kind of that's the satisfaction.
Son has returned. I bring the destruction of Olympus!
Cadence Crow in the opening cinematic flies down and ends up landing on this hapless victim. And as he's eating the guy, he rips the eyeball out of the socket. So it's especially like juicy and nasty. Later today I'll be working on the vein that the eyeball's attached to. So maybe the crow can like wrestle the eye out and really get some good squirming going on in the audience sort of thing. The way it works is that you lay down your base color. For example, with this guy, you get like a good skin tone going. And then from there, you add additional details. Like with this guy, his main details are the cuts that he has and then the dirt that's added. There's some sort of distortion going on here, and that's because it's actually being wrapped in 3D. So you can sort of feel where the chin line is just because of how these are bending.
This is Hercules, and he's wearing these cestises, and basically they're like these huge gauntlets. Just trying to get across the fact that he's kind of like this aged warlord. He's not a super fresh young guy, so he's got some fat to him and some history. So a lot of the visual elements that he has, I think, parallel what Kratos wears. The really fun stuff was sculpting his flesh and his muscles and whatnot. Like, this is a final concept image, but we take it a step further and put a level of polish on it that isn't there, because once it's here, this is a beautiful painting, but once it goes in the game, it needs to be perfect at every angle. Every angle you look at it has to be a great piece of work. So it's you have to go in and you take this and you take everything a step further, and you know there can't be any mistakes.
Call it my 13th and final labor. Soon I will become the god of war and claim the throne for myself.